Snap. Okay. Okay. What's happening, y'all? L.A.R movement still moving. If you can see the title, basically it's saying, you might want to leave your hometown. Um, when I was a kid, I moved a lot, right? And first and foremost, just checking in, going live just because I moved a lot. And when I moved a lot, I got a chance to see something outside of where I was born, which is New Orleans. So I moved from New Orleans to, I want to say the first place. What's happening, Johnny? I want to say the first place was uh was Maryland, and then Chicago, and then back to New Orleans, I think, and then back to Chicago. But the reason I'm talking about that is because a lot of people don't leave their hometown, and they don't realize that the town is so small that you might want to leave sometimes because it might expand where you're at. It might make you a better person to leave your hometown. I'm starting young. This is why I'm doing this live. I'm starting when I was younger because when you're a kid and you're in your hometown, your block seems so big. You know what I'm saying? Your neighborhood seems so big. You might be in a school and your school seems so big because you're a kid. But there are other schools and you don't realize that the world is bigger than your area. So sometimes you might you might grow out of your hometown, or you might grow in a sense of it might expand your mind. Like when I was in Chicago, um, my older cousin was in Indianapolis at the time, and he was playing for the Colts. He came to Chicago and he drove me around in the better neighborhoods. He drove me by Michael Jordan's house. And this is the thing about being in your hometown. Sometimes you're in your hometown and you really don't even get a full grasp of where you live. You don't even get a full grasp of how everybody's living in your hometown. You know how you're living, you know how your neighborhood is living, but you don't know how people outside of that sucker's living. Oh shit, you in China? Dang, this man didn't do that. You know, and I learned that lesson from people in New Orleans also, because as a kid, the thing about New Orleans, the thing about Chicago was I saw a lot of people who were older and they never left the area. And for me, because my parents moved and I had to move my parents a lot, um, it didn't it seemed weird to me that people were grown and they were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, always in their hometown, and you could tell that they never left or they never had the inclination to leave. You know, and I've seen that Solo, man, Hotep, man. I'm gonna get you for that. I'm gonna get you for that. I'm glad to see you, player. And if y'all don't know, Solo's the man. Solo's dope. Uh, the thing about leaving your hometown is always the ideology of it might be different somewhere else. Sometimes people get stuck of how we live where we at, to the point that you can't go anywhere else. Now, the reason I'm making this is about life and competition to a degree. You know what I'm saying? Because one of the first lessons you learn, whether you're doing academics or athletics, when you're in grade school or high school, wherever you at, is competing against other schools, right? So then you start realizing people have different teachers' upbringings. You're not the only one working hard. There's other people working hard. So now you can't outwork the people in your block, your street, your school. You got to outwork the people in a certain area. As you get older, you start realizing you might have to outwork people from different cities, different states, different regions. It's not about just where you're at. You dig? That's to a degree that's problematic. For some people, that's problematic. So the thing about it that's ultimately a issue a lot of times is you might need to leave your hometown, to see that the world is bigger than that. Because I see a lot of adults who are stuck, because they can't see past their city. And sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes you might be in a city that's very competitive and very tough, and you might want to leave your hometown because you don't want to compete with all the other people. I've seen people go from major cities to small cities, so they didn't have to be expected to do as much to survive, only to be lazy in those small cities. So you're gonna take you wherever you go in life. If you're a hard worker, you're gonna take that from a big town to a small town to a small town to a big town. Vice versa. If you're lazy, you're gonna take that from a small town to a big town to a big town to a small town. That's just what it is. And I realized at the end of the day that some people don't, you know, it might be in your best interest to leave at times, because sometimes leaving your hometown makes you smarter. Because the thing about, even when I grew up in the South, the Midwest, and the East. Though those are different mentalities, different cities, different structures, different architecture. The vibe is completely different. You know what I'm saying? And and so sometimes when I will go from one city to another, man, Gene, thank you. Um, when I would go from one state to one city to another, I could see it's different. So when I was in Indiana, it was is a bit different. Tennessee was different. Georgia was different. Florida was different. Carolina's different. Um, I never really stayed in West Virginia per se, so Mississippi different. Texas different. And you start learning those lessons that you don't learn in your hometown. I feel you, Roscoe, and that's part of what I'm talking about. Sometimes when people say travel, they're trying to tell you to get a different perspective from a different point of view. Some people get it, some people don't. Um, the thing about getting a different point of view is a lot of times, you start realizing there are go-getters in every city, state, region, country, and there are losers in every city, state, region, and country. You know, and that's not going to change. What changes is you see where you stand at in the grand scheme of things in society. Now, as far as like, you're gonna have to leave your hometown sometimes. The only group of people I wouldn't advise to leave, I would advise you leave your hometown, but not your home state, are college students. Because a lot of college students who want to leave their hometown, sometimes they want to leave their home state. And those student loans and those out of state fees, unless you have a scholarship, they really gonna crush you on the back, and you're gonna wish you hadn't done that. But after you graduate, go and leave. You know, sometimes you got to leave your hometown because it's a breath of fresh air somewhere else. See, some people don't realize sometimes you do as much as you can in a particular place, and then you move on, you move out, and what winds up happening is you go somewhere else, and it's new to you. It feels new. It feels different. The air is different. The vibe's different, and you feel like opportunity, maybe around the corner that wasn't when you were in your hometown, you know, and some people forget about that. And this is why, to a degree, I get it when they have people who migrate to America from other countries. They come from different places, and they can all be from different places, and they create their own little enclave that reminds them of home, but they're not home. And because they're not home, they realize they have to compete a little bit harder, fight a little bit harder, be a little bit smarter than other people. And what's up? What's up, Refi? You know, and and work and maneuver a whole lot differently. And that's the issue. Like, some of us, we want to come together as a people, and it's okay for people to, we can be black, but we don't all have to be from the same place in the same city. In the same city, we could be black and come from different places and hook up together in a different city. You know, because a lot of times, I've seen people who were stuck in the idea of being scared of being successful in another place. Oh man, I don't know nobody. It's too fast. I can't. I don't know if I could keep up. It's this, it's that. Another part about the hometown thing is sometimes you got to move around and realize, you can have your best life in a different place. What I mean by that is this: if you live in New York, it's expensive. You mess around and move to Texas or Georgia and make the same amount of money you was making in New York, you're gonna live drastically different. Drastically different. Same thing with California. Um, the DMV is high. Chicago's rising. So that's one of those things, you know, where we don't get it. Trina was good. Reese was popping. You know, there comes a point where you might need to leave your hometown and just like re-up new. Now I'm not gonna tell you to be a nomad and just because some people do that and go too far. I will say that some people leave their hometown and they just start traveling and traveling and traveling and traveling, but never settle down anywhere. Because the responsibility of making a home somewhere other than your home, you just you want to be free to the point where you go nowhere. You go everywhere but go nowhere at the same time. But you might want to leave your hometown. Like sometimes, you know, there are things that you can't predict. There are things you can't predict. My bad. The things you can't predict because at the end of the day, there are people who don't have a strong work ethic in their hometown because it's their hometown. There are people who don't network in their hometown because it's their hometown, and I already know everybody, but they don't make their upward mobility isn't as vast as it can be because they feel like I can always hook up with people, blah blah blah. Everybody knows me, so that drive isn't as serious as if you went to a town where you didn't know anybody and you got to start from scratch. Your networking ability isn't as serious as if you were just somebody fresh on the scene and new on the scene. That's a whole different animal. You know, one of the other reasons about the hometown thing is you can't necessarily be a hometown hero always in a hometown. You can be a the hometown superstar, but it's rare that you in your hometown. You grew up in your hometown. Everything you did was in your hometown. You became successful in your hometown, and everybody reveres you in your hometown. That's rare. You know, People want to know that you went out and went into the world and succeeded in the world, and they can do the same. You know, because you got a lot of lessons. You got a lot of lessons that you can learn when you're not at home. You start to realize how serious life is, but how fun life is. Because it starts dawning on you that if you leave your hometown to a degree, you leave your support system, and sometimes you know you gotta cut the cord because to be out here and to be an adult or to stand on your own 2 feet, sometimes it's difficult for people to do that because they're always in their hometown. There's always a parent to call, a family member to call, a childhood friend to call, somebody um, that always looks out for your family or friends to call, and you don't really cut the cord and stand on your own. You may take too much advantage of your network because you never left home. You know, and the same thing. I remember being younger, and you know, if y'all don't know about this, like back when kids would go to college, they'll leave and they'll be homesick their first year. I miss my girlfriend, I miss my boyfriend, I miss my family, I miss my mama, I miss my daddy, I miss my pet dog, I miss my goldfish. So they would sabotage actually starting the process of being an independent adult in a different environment by being so homesick that they fail on purpose to go back home. And most of those people uh, didn't really pan out as adults or not panning out as adults because they need to run back to the comforts of home. Arrested development happens a lot of times when you stay at home because uh, there are no challenges at the time. You know, the, you might max out your intelligence at home. You know, I've been in the country, I've been in the city. You know, that's a completely different lifestyle. But what I did learn was how to survive in the country and how to survive in the city, right? And you can bring both mentalities and mend them together, whether you're in the country or in the city, for your benefit. Same thing about, you know, I have a New Orleans mindset, I have a Chicago mindset, little bit of a DMV mindset, but not as much. But the thing about that is I could take that mentality in other places. Like when people talk about, they got a New York state of mind and they take that everywhere. They about they hustle. Like I met a lot of New Yorkers who are in the South grinding real hard because that's all they're accustomed to is the grind and the hustle in New York, and they take that elsewhere. And when they take that elsewhere, it's like they moving, like they seriously moving. And they like, look, I'm gonna come up in another city because I'm taking my New York state of mind with me in these other states. You know what I'm saying? And I see that all the time, people from other places, other environments. This is why, to a degree, you got to learn to leave your hometown. Because if you don't, what happens, I've left and came back and the city's still the same. The neighborhood's still the same. The same people still there, in the same places, in the same spot, doing the same thing that they was doing 10, 20 years ago. Not cool. You know, and that's one of the reasons I say sometimes you got to leave it, because if you find yourself as one of those people who your friends are going nowhere and you're going nowhere with your friends, then what we talking about here? You know what I'm saying? What are we really talking about? Oh, my bad. At the end of the day, you stuck in one of those situations where nothing is really going to go your way. Nothing. Because in your hometown, you got friends that may build you up, but a lot of times the people that you're looking for that are the positive people are the people that left and came back, or they left and came back to help the community, or they left and they coming back to visit. And you're like, dang, you've been doing all that? What you been doing? Because they left home. They ain't got no choice but to do something positive, because the world is not gonna help you like that. The world is not your friend. Reese, I feel you. I went back home maybe about after 10 years one time, and I had to look at it. And I was like, this how I look? This how I grew up? It looked like this when I left, didn't it? Because, and I had that look because, when you're a kid, you don't know how bad it is, how bad it looks. I ain't going to say how bad it is, how bad it looks. You don't know exactly the type of environment you're necessarily in because it's home, right? But I can compare it to where the places I've been afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, living better than I was. And that's the thing. You might get so comfortable at home, you might get uncomfortable with something better than your hometown. And I saw that a lot after Katrina. Like when folks left New Orleans, they was going everywhere. You had some people who's like, man, I could have been. I'm gonna live in this city because this is a whole lot better than New Orleans. And then you had some people who couldn't function in these other cities because it ain't New Orleans, and because they couldn't change, or they wanted to take New Orleans with them everywhere, to the point that the unproductive parts of New Orleans they took with them. O'Shea Linux, what's up? BK, I feel you. I feel you. JL Meadows, my bad, bro. But that's part of the issue. Marzel, I ain't even see you. My bad. And plus, I'm gonna tell you this. Like, I remember being in high school, and I told my friends, I said, man, I ain't never coming back to Chicago. They was like, yeah, whatever. But see, I wasn't born in Chicago. So I was born in the South. I knew that it's not cold in the winter like that. So I knew I was coming back to the South because I didn't want to be in those winters, period. But that was the gift of being able to move around. The favorite city, my favorite city that I lived in was in the DMV. It was DC. DC was dope. All of the architecture, the environment, all of the buildings, the museums, and all that. the White House and all that stuff. And then the city had that vibe, the go house music vibe, the college vibe, um, the football vibe. You know what I mean? It was it was like it was like a New Orleans kind of feel in a different way. To me, it was like New Orleans and Chicago mixed together on the East. That's what when I that's how I felt, which kind of make me feel like double home to a degree. And they got seafood with the crab and all that other stuff, so it's dope. But I don't like the cold. And see, that's the thing about it. Like if you move around, you realize you might be better in a certain region. If you leave your hometown, you might be better. You might work better in a certain region. Some people like the cold, so some people might go to a colder place. You want 4 seasons, so that's the thing people like about certain places in the middle part of America. Like Atlanta to like Denver type of Nashville stuff like that. They might like all 4 seasons. You know, so you it does something for your mood because some people don't like the heat so much because they baking and they don't like that. But so they leave their hometown to go somewhere else to get cooler. But you got to go places, man. Mississippi's off the chain, O'Shea. I ain't been there in a minute though. Cousin was in Ida Bena. Some of my family from Jackson, so yeah, I ain't going there. you know, and I learned that, just like Reese. Reese, I'm gonna tell you something. When I was in Chicago, I went to New Orleans one summer to be my grandmother, and it can get hot in Chicago, but not like Louisiana or Texas. So I'm standing in the airport, and you know when it's so hot, you see the waves of the heat bouncing off the concrete, and I'm looking as I'm walking to the doors, and the heat smacked me in the face like Mike Tyson in 89. And I'm like, oh, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, I don't want to be here. It's too hot. It's 197 degrees. I'm gonna be here the whole summer. Jesus, But most people don't realize is if you can survive maybe mid-June to September, it's smooth sailing the rest of the months. I mean, because you can tell when the season changes. The seasons change in the South. You can just tell by the wind. It might be somewhere late September. It'll be hot one day, and then the breeze will come through. And from then on, you good. But that's the thing about you gotta be other places to know that. Like when I was on vacation, I went to Vegas. I love the weather. It was great. Now I know it's gonna bake in the summertime. Why? What's happening? Uh, I know it's gonna bake in the summertime, but that's my family. I got family in Arizona. It's like dry heat is different from southern heat. You know what I'm saying? So you get different experiences. But part of leaving your hometown is you got to get to learn that. You got to get to learn that because there may be certain environments that are just better for your mind state. When I left home, when I left the Shy, my first year of college, yeah, yeah, hometown still remains in the heart. You know, yeah, I don't like Indianapolis. I just don't. Kind of dry to me, but whatever. But that's the thing. Like I remember leaving, and I was on a college campus in a freshman dorm, and I'll never forget. I couldn't sleep because I wasn't hearing gunshots and helicopters and police sirens. It's like I can't sleep without that kind of noise. It took me a while to adjust to quiet at night, right? But then I got used to it, and I was like, you know what? This is how you should be living. Like it shouldn't be what you thinking about. And people don't realize that from time to time. But if you leave, you realize that. And it's not sometimes. Let me explain something to you. Like I was saying, if I think college students shouldn't leave their home state because of the out of state fees, but if try to go to another college outside of your hometown because other people gravitate there, and you can get a feel for places you might want to go by the people you meet. Because sometimes when you're active and you go out and you meet people, they bring their everybody brings their uptown their their hometown with them. Everybody carries their experiences with them. So certain vibes you like, it might be a Cali vibe, it might be a Colorado vibe, it might be a Georgia vibe, a Florida vibe, a Carolina vibe, a New York vibe, a Jersey vibe. If you keep gravitating to a certain type of thing, when you're done, you might want to check that area out. It might be good for you. It might be conducive for who you are as a person, because where you're at is just where you're at. Where you were born and where you grew up, that's just where you're born and where you grew up. But you don't have to be stuck there to death do you part. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that a lot of people don't get. Like, you don't have to be there all the time. That's why a lot of cats, they go to the military and they come back. People miss them, like, damn, you been gone, blah blah blah. Yeah, because they've experienced a lot, and sometimes you can't experience as much as the world has to offer by just being stuck in your hometown. If you're just stuck in your hometown, I got friends, who are in the military now in the Middle East. Some stationed in Japan and whatnot like that. You know, that's because they have a whole different view of life than I do. And I left my hometown and I don't live in it. You know what I'm saying? And they left their hometown, they don't live in it. But now their experience goes far beyond America. You know, and some of the things that work in other countries that don't work in this country, and some things that work in this country that don't work in other countries, there's still nuances that can make you more productive in this country. You know, certain places are more disciplined, certain places are more strict. Certain places they have harsher penalties for shenanigans. You get what I'm saying? So you learn. So if you got an issue, you want to be a rebel, you can't go be a rebel everywhere in the world. You want to be hood and street everywhere in the world, you can't do that everywhere in the world. You when you leave your hometown, you're gonna quickly find that out. You know, in New Orleans, people left New Orleans. I'm from such and such. You can't take that everywhere. Well, I remember my younger cousin was so what's happening, Kamar? I mean, Jamar, what's popping? I remember my younger cousin was like, I'm third ward, I'm Calio, blah blah blah, Magnolia. In Chicago, they wasn't trying to hear that. They was not trying to hear that. He was shook. He was like, yo, they crazy. Dog, they crazy. Because you're not in New Orleans. Different place, different rules. But he learned the lesson of, you can't take your neighborhood with you everywhere, in your neighborhood's ideologies and rhetoric everywhere. Sometimes moving and getting out of your hometown makes you more respectful of people, places, things, different mentalities, how people talk, how people operate, how people move. You start thinking about it like, oh, okay. And here's the other thing. When you start getting different experiences with different people, your nonverbal communication works a whole lot better, because you might have a language barrier as far as certain terms and dialect, even in America. And you might have when you meet people from other countries, you might have a language barrier, period. But you'll be able to communicate non-verbally because you've learned commonalities in people that sometimes you just don't have to speak about. That you can kind of talk your way through and figure things out, and come to a common understanding, because if they've been around and you've been around, they've also had that experience of having to adjust to the different language barriers. And it works great, because sometimes you get so good to the point you don't even have to talk to people who speak a completely different language, but you know what each other are talking about. And it's this part of leaving the hometown. Some you could bring your slang with you, but your slang might not translate. And that's the thing. Sometimes you might think a word and words work where you're at, and they may use the same word, but it means something completely different somewhere else. And you're like, wait, what? Customs completely different somewhere else. So I'm just saying, you got to leave your hometown sometimes. You got to take a risk. Start when you start young. And one of my first experiences even was that high school travel, those away games, because now you got to see how other neighborhoods live, how other people live, how they came up. What's going on with you, cool gent? How everybody moved and maneuvered and got around and did things. and then you start saying, okay, because you could gauge people better if you move around. You could gauge their mentality. You know the difference between somebody who's hungry and came from nothing and is working their butt off, and the difference between somebody who's silver spoon and they got it handed to them and they're spoiled. You know the difference because you moved around. You know, what's up, Elzu? You know, you'll know the difference. And you know the difference, but that's an easy one to pick out. What's not so easy sometimes to pick out is somebody who grew up in a silver spoon environment that will outwork you, that take advantage of everything from their environment and it became a serious beast about life because they know things that you don't know. They've been practicing on it. Their parents have taught them, and they took these lessons and ran with them. And you might have the will and the work ethic and the heart, but you don't have the knowledge. You know what I'm saying? So you'll know the difference. Like, oh man, that person's serious. And but that comes with not being stuck in one space, you know. And then you come to find out, you know, when you move around that there's only a there's a minority percentage of people in the world who are actually trying to be their best and do their best. They're actually a minority of people who are trying to compete for a better life because when you think my travels have let me know that a lot of times a lot of people in their hometown wonder why people that come from a different area can come and live better than them in their hometown. And it's very simple. You're comfortable in your hometown, they're not, you know, period. And a lot of people, because they're comfortable in their hometown, they don't push to have a better life like other people who made themselves uncomfortable. And the reason I say leave your hometown, it is about comfort zone. See, sometimes you got to get uncomfortable. You know, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You got to get comfortable being out of your comfort zone. And that'll push you to be a better person. You know, and sometimes you start championing, yeah, championing the people that where you're from, and you connect to them more because you get to see the struggle differently. Like my best experience in life as a young man was actually DC because I was a kid. When I realized that they printed money, the money we use in America in DC, right? And but you could see poor people right, you know, quarter mile, half mile, a mile away, poverty. You know, the White House back in the day, the projects was behind the White House. So I had that quick connection between wait. If this is where they make the money and they make all the policies, this should probably be the richest city, you know, in America because this is where they make money. They literally make the money here. But people are living in poverty here. So I was like, okay, the government doesn't necessarily, you know, it doesn't work that way where, okay, this is our home base and we're gonna make sure home is right and then we're gonna spread out. It ain't like that, you know. And I learned that about life where, you know, people make their own little enclaves where they at because the government can't, you know, success and failure is really uh based on you and your circumstances and and what you make out of yourself and your circumstances. Everybody's everybody has the ability to be successful, but everybody does is not going to be successful because everybody um, may not have that extra push, may not be as lucky as other people, you know. But if you leave your hometown, it'll open you up to all that. You know what, George? I always blame you. I'm about to get out of here anyways, George. You know what? You know, I blame Philly cheesesteaks too. I blame Steakums. That's what I blame. But that's the thing. When you leave home, you will be surprised at the information that you learn. Honey, what's good? You know, and that's the thing. Like you might learn more interacting with people outside of your hometown than you learn from people inside of your hometown. And think about it, your first issue might be even your professors and your teachers, because you know another lesson I learned. What's happening, Jewel? I was in high school. I had a physics honors class, and I want to say my teacher was like from Kazakhstan, not Kazakhstan, but a part of like Ukraine or something like that. And we used to have this news station, and the news station was, like student news, but they had a little global thing that was going on, and the news played, and they did a clip of basically an area, his country, and the kids were talking, blah 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 blah, and the kid that was the reporter was like, and they said such and such and such and such, and my teacher just looked at the class and he says, that is not what they said. And that was my first time going, now I get propaganda, because I wouldn't have known any better because I didn't know that language, but my teacher knew the language because it was his home language. So I would have known, So when people used to, when I see people speaking a different language on television and people go, yeah, and they say da 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 da, no, I got to look up the words. I got just let's that's not that's what they said. That's not what they said. You know, but you only learn that when you're around people and situations that are not tied to where you're at. You know, that's the thing about it. You know, one of the other thing I learned quick, and then I'm gonna get out of here. College students, like at HBCUs, will vote, because I vote my first time voting. I started college at 17, so when I turned 18, I could vote. So what they would do with college students is, because you're a college student, you came from a different state, or you're in a different city, you're not necessarily registered. You're registered as a United States citizen, but you're not. So they would give you grief about voting. And we knew they didn't do that at the white schools to that degree, So a lot of times when you see these college students raising hell to vote, is because they figure they're young, they're not from here. Let me take advantage of them. Let's squash their vote, you know. But you learn that if you leave your hometown and you put yourself in a different environment, you learn that, like, oh, this is what they doing. This is how things happen. It's not just gerrymandering and like kind of like red line and stuff. Sometimes when you leave your home, you wind up in situations outside of your home that you like, oh, I didn't know that existed. Charles Willie, what's going on, Suge? Charles Willie's one of the coolest people. I swear to God. Like, I appreciate you, Charles Willie. I really do. You know, that when you leave home, you realize things. And leaving home expands your horizon in this way of culture. I love going different places because people have different cultures. It's different foods, different ideologies, and one of the easiest ways to step outside of your culture is to go to a restaurant completely different from your culture. Sometimes they're gonna look at you like, "Who the hell is this?" But other time people talk and they just see, "Oh, you're just trying to try something new and check out people." Yeah, just people watching and society watching. But if and then when you go to other places, you realize, oh, it's like that, because quick other little thing I learned. 8th grade, in Chicago, they have the Odyssey, which is that yacht. Anybody who watched that R. Kelly video, "Step in the Name of Love," that boat that was on Lake Michigan, that's the Odyssey, right? They have a restaurant on a boat. So we went on a field trip, and I'm on the boat, and it was time to eat. And I saw the menu, and they said Louisiana, authentic New Orleans gumbo. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on this. Let me get that. Let me get that. So I ordered, and they bring me the bowl, and I'm in the 8th grade, and I'm like, what's this? It's like, this is authentic gumbo from New Orleans. I'm like, okay, here's the problem. Now I remember it like it's yesterday. Plate, big plate, bowl. They had the rice scooper. The scooper was of rice was in the middle. The gumbo was around it. The color was completely off. Like that wasn't roux and it wasn't gumbo. And I had to look at the waitress. I said, "Listen, see, here's the thing." She's like, "What?" "I'm from New Orleans. This ain't gumbo." She took that joint. Said, "I'm gonna bring you something else," because you know the difference. Like the authenticity is only from areas that you know to be home, and you start realizing when you leave home, people try to duplicate that authenticity other places. Like people don't realize Popeyes. You know, I grew up. We would go on Canal Street in the Popeyes. The Popeyes on Canal Street. I want to say by Canal and Bourbon. This is like a two-story one. Once you get from that Popeyes and go outward, you lose flavor. So when you get from that one in New Orleans and you go outward, you lose flavor. So when you go to other cities, it's worse. Okay. And I learned that about restaurants and chains because I was of leaving my hometown. I learned that, they can't get it right like they get it right at home. But people learn that, and then that's when you go out and eat and you start go in places say, oh, New York style, Chicago style. Only few people who are actually from there get it right, and that's why they profit the way they do in different cities because they're an actual taste of home, but they and brought their hometown somewhere else with them. This is what I'm getting at, you know. So at the end of the day, I just gotta say, y'all gotta be comfortable with leaving your hometown because if you're not, you might regret it. It's okay. Sometimes you can leave and then come back, but give it a shot. Sometimes give it a shot when you're in a reasonable age to do it. Because if you don't, you might not like it whatsoever, bro. You know. But I'm out of here, y'all. I want y'all to have a great day, man. Thanks for rocking with me. This is just easier to do it in videos. I gotta admit that. So peace. One.